Thank you so much for being here this week. Okay, last week we did my pantry, we reorganized it, decluttered it. My friend Leigh Daugherty helped me sort of get a system in place and coached me through what to buy and what to think about. It was really helpful. This week she's back and we're going to talk more about her book, How to Get Your House in Order. And she's going to go in depth on why we create clutter, what are the habits that we fall into, and what are some of our shopping styles that keep us collecting clutter, and how do we get out of it? And she'll help us get a system in place for, how to solve those problems. Anyways, let's get into it because I think you're going to find it really interesting. So let's go. So welcome to this podcast, and I am so excited to have you on here. I love your book. It is so fantastic, and it was such a big help with my pantry. So if anybody hasn't seen the pantry, glow up, go see that video because she comes on and gives me a lot of really great tips on how to get my pantry in order. But now she's here to talk more about her book, which is all about decluttering and why we hold on to so much clutter. It's so interesting. But Leigh, first, give me a little bit of a background, just a little background about yourself.
Sure. And first of all, thanks for having me and for the pantry project. You did a great job. I can't really take any credit because you're the one that did the work. And I'm so excited that you're loving it as much as you are. So, my name is Leigh Daugherty. I am the author of How to Get Your House in Order, Downsize, Organize, and Prioritize. And that's really my lifestyle now. And I love helping other people get there as well. My background started in fashion. I was a fashion designer and director for 3 decades for some really big brands like Calvin Klein, J.C. Penney, Lane Bryant. And I had a fabulous career for a long time. And I got to travel all over the world. But I got to a point where I was totally burnt out. And it is very much a part of my story and my journey, my decluttering journey. And that was just that I was a very busy career woman. I was extremely overwhelmed. I had 2 young kids that were like school age. And I was trying everything just to keep my head above water.
Yeah.
And I really felt like, I was drowning most of the time.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot in my book. And I actually call myself, my moniker is the understanding organizer because I understand, because I've been there. I was the one that was too embarrassed to, like, if somebody were just to pop in, unannounced, like, oh my gosh, the house is a mess. And of course, with kids comes its own, separate layer of clutter and toys and laundry. And, there was laundry on my couch. There was disorganization everywhere, kids' projects piled up in the kitchen, a garage so crowded and so full of boxes that we couldn't park a car in there.
I
So,
think so many people can relate to that. I think so many can relate to that.
of course, right. So, and the other thing throughout my career in fashion, as much as, I loved so many parts of it, I always felt that I was missing something in my life in the sense of I really wanted to work with people and I wanted to make a difference in people's lives more than a great fitting pair of jeans, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so that's what this path led me there, and I ended up kind of jump starting my whole declutter process when I was going through a divorce. And it was kind of a natural jumping off place because my ex-husband had taken half the stuff out of the house that was his, right? So I said, this is a great time. And actually, before I even started purging, I conceptualized the book. I had a vision in my head. I remember when Pinterest first came out and I was like pinning all these beautiful minimal spaces. Like I was already there in my head, right?
Yeah.
So to figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah, and how do you get there? How do you get what's in your head from this clutter? And I've known you long enough to know that whenever you have started a job,
through your career, you jumped to management positions or overseeing groups of people. So you naturally are a good organizer, but that sometimes doesn't translate to our home. I think
It's
because
so
it's
true.
emotional and all of that. And I think that's important to know because so many people are so organized and successful in their lives, but their homes are, not so much. Yeah.
Exactly. And I also talk about that in my book, like to my peers at work and in my performance reviews. I was called like strategic, organized, a leader, right? But if they would have seen what was going on behind closed doors, they
Yeah.
it was kind of it was a whole different story. And it's also, I don't know if you ever notice how it's so much easier to like clean and organize someone else's space other than your own
Exactly.
because you're
Exactly.
totally detached. Just like I could tell somebody, "Oh, you should do this with your life. You should do this." But am I really following, that my
Yeah.
own advice, right? So, cuz it's harder when it's your own stuff because it really gets into all the emotions, and
Mhm.
that's what makes my book I think different than a lot of the other declutter books. Yes, they will touch on that, but my for me it's more the emphasis because you cannot organize your home until you declutter and you
Yeah.
really simplify. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah, and you started off your book saying, I remember a house so cluttered that if someone were to drop by, I would be too embarrassed to invite them in. And I
Yes.
think, was that kind of like your breaking point? I mean, was that kind of your turnaround point? Like, this isn't working for me. I mean,
Yes, I would say so. And then there was also a quote. And also, like, as I said about the Pinterest, that was what just came out. And I was escaping in my reality
mm,
by going online and looking at these pictures, like we often do with other things in our life.
right.
And I also read a quote that changed my life. And that's how I start my book out is Albert Einstein. He says, every possession is like a stone around my neck.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's very
It's
true.
like, I always need a good visual to help me, to motivate me, if you
Right.
will. And I think everybody has moved in their lifetime. I moved many times because across the country, back and forth, because of the tumultuous, business that I was in. And every time it's like you cursing everything you own, right? Or
Oh, yeah.
so much of it, like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't know I had so much of this. And it's just like things get hidden away and they're out of sight, out of mind. And so many clients that I help move, there are still boxes sitting there from untouched from the last time they moved.
No, I understand that. I completely understand that. Having moved from New York to Dallas and just all around New York, it's just you end up just like, oh my, that's a real quick way of like realizing what you want or what you don't want.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
willing to pack it and take it. So one of the
exactly.
things you said in your book is because when I've recommended this book to people, they'll say like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to read a book on decluttering when I could just be decluttering.
Hmm.
And your book is so much more than that because you talk about how we're building the clutter and why we have it in the first place. And it's mostly, as you touched on before, it's mostly emotional attachments because we
Yes.
could all clean each other's houses out in a week or a couple
Hmm.
of days. But,
Right.
that couch, I sat on it every Christmas at Aunt Edna's house. It has, it's a little bit harder to get rid of that. So you said something about it's a clutter is sort of an example of having unclear priorities. So, what would you say? So, I think what you're trying in your book, I think you help people get clear on their priorities and
Right.
and get
Yeah.
clear on their habits. So it's more emotional
It's
than
the
psychological.
whole
Yeah.
the whole book is kind of a holistic view on the three habits of HEO, which I call, which stands for house and order. And that's downsize, prioritize, and organize. And the book is set up very simple, like and graphic. It's like bite-sized chunks. It's very easy to read. Many have told me that they read it in one day.
I did. Yeah.
It's kind of part workbook some storytelling, and I use stories that sometimes are my own personal experiences or friends or also people that I met along the way, not physically met, but I discovered along my way that became kind of my mentors and inspirational. And I talk about that. But it's really about, and one of my readers said this, he said, the way you tell the stories really help you get to the heart of the matter of the whatever trigger an emotion is holding you back.
Right.
Because most of my clients come to me at a point where they've had enough.
Yeah.
Like they are so overwhelmed, they have so much anxiety, and they're ready to make a change in their life. And that's the hardest part, is just getting started.
And it is, and it's also, we all have habits and buying habits, and we all escape in different ways. And there's a section in your book where you talk about possessionality. Am I saying that right?
Yes, that's right.
Possessionality.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that and examples of it, because I think you are giving examples of the type of personality and how they create clutter.
Yes.
that
And
they don't
that's
even
just
know.
kind of right. That's just kind of a fun way a lighthearted way to start kind of figuring out how and why you collect and, you know, accumulate the things that you do. Um, yeah, it's kind of like a little icebreaker. I often use that when I do a workshop because it's fun. It kind of gets people and they can kind of laugh at themselves, right? And it also just helps you identify and focus on what you need to do throughout the process. So, for instance, one of them is like the collector. That's the most self-explanatory one because we all know what a collection is, right? We go through different phases. I think about my mom and all the different phases she went through. It's like her cow collection. And then, she had so many different collections of things that she was into for a while. I used to collect teapots. And then suddenly I'm carrying around this I'm moving back and forth all these places. And the teapots are literally like in boxes still, right? The other one is like like the aspirational self. And that is someone, and I think that there's about 8 different ones, possessionalities, but within there, I know I've checked 5 out of 8 of those. Like I'm a combination. People are. But the aspirational is someone who's always buying something for the aspirational, the better version of themselves. Like a juicer, like a $400 juicer, or like exercise equipment. Something that's going to make their life better, but often it just kind of sits around, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yes.
Or people who buy for later, we might need it. You know what I mean?
Exactly, right. And to your point, you were speaking about something like this earlier, is that our behaviors and habits are created so much, like they're based on how we were brought up, right? And like, what did that look like? What did our home look like? What was our support system? I have found when I have clients that are more on the hoarding side of the spectrum, maybe they have hoarding tendencies. It was one of 2 things. They were either grew up in a hoarding home, or they grew up in a hoarding home and either they repeat the behavior or they do just the opposite, right? Like so it's very interesting. There's a lot of psychology that comes into play. And when I'm working with my clients, so much of what I do is talk therapy as we're sorting through.
Right, because hoarding is, everybody calls themselves, I'm a hoarder, but that's a true personality disorder.
It is like when you're really getting to, yes, a true hoarder. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people talk and joke about the show Hoarders. Oh, I like to watch that because it makes me feel better about my home. Okay, but I actually had to stop watching that show because I felt it was so triggering for me because I know what it's like. And yes, these people are getting the help that they need, but I know what it's like to work with them and how much pain they're in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it's easy to have hoarding tendencies, for things that we like. You can be a luxury hoarder, someone
Right.
who has tons of shoes and bags and so forth. But, getting back to the possessionalities, the biggest one that I probably relate to is the creator. And the
Mhm.
creator is, and I know that a lot of people that watch your channel will get this because they love to create and make things and decorate and thrift, right? So you have all these grandiose ideas like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna make this, and then you buy all the stuff. Just like for my kids, my first child, the baby book.
Oh
I
yeah.
have all the stuff. All scrapbooking was really big. I had all the stuff. I never did it. I didn't have time.
Yeah.
I didn't do something until years later, right? Out of guilt. So, and also I tell a story at the end of the book about this pair of mid-century modern chairs that I bought. And I literally like moved them around the country for 2 decades and never refinished them, never recovered them. That's just a good example, right?
That is a good example. Yeah.
Another one is the dreamer. The dreamer is someone who, I think I use the example of someone that will buy a surfboard at a garage sale, even though they're nowhere near the ocean, because
Yeah.
one day they want to go surfing or they're dreaming about it, or, they're some kind of special backpack because they dream about, backpacking Europe or hiking the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
Something. That's just a few examples.
Well, that's good, and that will help people identify. And I think it's good to help you identify like what kind of shopper. How are you maybe using it emotionally? Are
Oh
you
yeah.
escaping into it?
That
Another
will.
part of your book you talked about, and this is we've heard this before. What you own owns you.
Yes.
And I think so, you've identified what kind of shopper you are. You're looking around, you see all this clutter, and maybe you're going, okay, yeah, I can see, just by that, how I got here. I'm seeing all of this stuff. But what I like is how you talked about how, you were giving an example from your life, like how you were a busy mom and how Saturdays were the weekends were at your house because you had
Yes.
all this stuff. So talk more about that.
Right. So I think there's one quote in my book too that I said it's like, I felt like my happiness was hinging on a to-do list that never got done.
Right. Right.
Right. So,
Yeah.
and one example of that is laundry. Laundry never gets finished. It's just a cycle, right? So I was putting all this pressure on myself trying to not just declutter, but clean, declutter. I could sometimes organize, but I couldn't get there, right? And so, but the more stuff you have, the harder it is to contain, and it's like, um, I will also use an example of like owning a home,
Right.
and how I will also get a little bit, and we'll probably talk more about this, about how marketing really plays into us acquire what I call the desire to acquire.
Yeah,
And this,
exactly.
oh, a new home, and the way that's sold, like, have the freedom of owning your own home. Well,
Right.
owning your own home comes with, I mean, there's pros and cons, right? But usually it's like when you're upgrading to a new place, it's more space. So there's more space to fill up. Like when we moved from LA to Texas, and suddenly we were, renting this big 4-bedroom house, which is more space than we'd ever had. We had to start filling it up with furniture. We didn't have,
Right.
so the more space you have, the more expendable income you have, you will buy things.
Right.
And so what happens when, let's say you own a home and the market's not great and you get the opportunity of a lifetime to go overseas
Yeah,
to,
we're gonna get there because that's a good point. But right now I
yes,
want to stay on. So you have all of this stuff, right? And
yes.
and even before all of that, you know what kind of buyer, you know how you shop.
Mhm.
So like what you're kind of talking about is before you can start, you need to get a plan. And you were talking about I think
Yes.
it's like Maria Kondo. Is it Kondo or Konda? Condo, I think.
Condo.
Okay. You were
Yeah.
saying like literally do that. Go into each room. You know it's taking time away from your family. You know you're
Yes.
holding way too much laundry. You know you're putting way
Yes.
too many toys, all this kind of stuff. All right.
Right.
So how do you just simply start from there? You're talking about going from each room,
Hmm.
see how you feel, and starting there. Just as like for just a simple start.
Right. So I usually suggest that people kind of mentally prepare first.
Right.
I often like to compare it to like eating healthy or exercising. You have to make sure you're in the right mindset,
Right.
and you have to give yourself grace, and you have to give yourself permission to, like, this is for me and my family, but it's really got to come from a place like, I'm really doing this for me, my peace of mind, my self-worth, and I know I want to do it, right? Um,
Right. So
yeah,
you
so
go
that's
into a room and you just feel it.
yeah, so
And you're
step
just like,
one is like mentally preparing yourself,
right.
right? And there's also other lots of other things you can do and ways to go about it.
Yeah.
First of all,
We're gonna get to all those, but I'm
yeah.
going through like the chapters of your book,
Oh yeah,
how you're
sure.
building it up. And that is
Yeah.
like one way is just like, okay, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. I can just see all this clutter and
Yeah,
I'm
so
not feeling
that's
right.
step one,
So
mentally
now what do
prepare.
you do? And so then it's like you get a plan, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like you need to get a plan. You need to identify like what you're saying, what kind of a
Mhm.
shopper you are, how you're doing it. You need
And
to
what your
understand
goals are, what your
what
goals
your
are
goals are
for your
and like
space.
how you need to like and you know and it's like like get your plan. You know how you shop. It's not going to get any easier. There's so many cute things in stores. There's so many traps that we can get into.
Yes.
So once you get in and you just do maybe like a quick sweep of the toys and the clothes and you're like,
Mhm.
okay, then you
Yeah.
want to get your plans together. So and it's also like why do we have so much junk? So maybe people have gone through that first phase of, okay, this is really easy, but you're still like in my situation, you still have a lot of stuff that the harder stuff to get rid of. And that's when you need a plan. And it's
Yes,
like
exactly.
and
Yes.
so like we're talking about like why are we carrying so much stuff? Like what would you say to the person who's inherited a lot of antiques or their family are having trouble getting rid of things? Like so what would you say to somebody and they look around and Aunt Edna's couch and this
Hmm.
antique from somebody else? How would you coach them through that because it's not fitting with what they don't feel good about that when they go in the room and see those pieces.
Yes. So first of all, we would talk about the items, right? And where they came from. And I also always ask if that person is still alive.
Yeah.
Um, and because it's often guilt that's
Yeah.
keeping us from letting go, right?
Right.
So we just have a real conversation about it.
Right.
And then probably later on too, I could talk a little bit more about, how do you actually handle like when your mom or Aunt Edna does want to give you something, but we could talk about that in a little bit. But it's like really it's a simple process. If you're not attached to it and you're holding on to it because you feel guilty, then you need to honor it, honor the person that gave it to you, and you need to donate it or sell
Yeah.
it. Because here's the thing, here's what I think makes it easier. With all the upcycling going on, the thrifting, somebody's going to want it and somebody's going to love it.
Right.
So it's just you thank, you give the gratitude and you release it knowing somebody else is going to love it, right?
Right. Right.
And there are a few things that you may want, but you just have to choose. And most of the time, once people let go of the guilt and they give themselves permission to let go,
Mhm.
then it is so much easier for them to actually let go of it.
Right. And I think that's right. My mom used to always say like we're the caretakers of all these things that we're protecting for, so other people can inherit them. And I'm like, wow,
Yes,
that's loaded. That's loaded. I remember her
it
telling me
is.
that, and I was like, oh my God, I do
It's
not want to.
yes. It's true. And it's so interesting because these are conversations that need to be had
Right.
when that loved one is still alive. My
Right.
mother had been saying for years about me taking the silver, right? And I said, well, okay, I'll take the silver, but what I really want is this bookcase. It was this beautiful, gorgeous bookcase she had. Well, about a year before, 2 years before she passed, I went to visit her, and I went to the room and I said, Mom, where's the bookcase? She's like, oh, honey, I had to get rid of that old thing. And I was like,
Okay.
that was the
Yeah.
one thing. But then I had to let go of that, right?
Yeah.
I had to let go of the bookcase, and I took the silver. But it's important because the generations, things change. The whole concept of ownership is so different, than like our children who
Right.
are, um, Gen Z, right? And some of them don't really care. So it's just really important to, when you have a loved one that's trying to give you something, just to have a heartfelt conversation and say, hey, I know this means a lot to you, this piece, but I don't really have a connection to it. Um, and why, maybe ask them why they want you to have it so much, and
Right.
listen through their stories, because most of the time, like, they want you to listen to their stories about it, right? So that's then about honoring them, honoring the item, whatever it is, while they're still alive. And maybe you can kind of talk about, maybe somebody else would want that. And you can also say, well, like I did with my mother, that wasn't that effective, but you know what I really love is, I love this that you have, because it reminds me of when I used to come to your house and visit, and maybe it's your grandmother, or when I was growing up, this is the thing that meant the most to me. So it's kind of
Redirecting it a bit.
redirecting it.
Right.
Exactly right.
And then maybe, well, let's just jump to that. So when you do have relatives who want to give you stuff, you can
Mhm.
be, you don't have to take it. You
You
can,
don't.
you don't have to
You
take it.
don't. No. And
And
that's.
you, yeah, and you can, as you said, help them find a place for it. And
Mhm.
if you are, and that's another thing we can just talk about it now, is like when you are trying to help a loved one, like I'm trying to help my
Mm.
mother actually right
Yeah.
now. It's
Yeah.
like how to phrase it and how to help. Do you have how to help them get on board? Because it's very painful for them. Like my wife
Yeah.
has a real,
Yes.
she hasn't done
And
anything with
And
it.
speaking of loaded questions too, I mean, I feel like so many parts of my book just could expand to a whole episode, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
there's so much involved, because this is our lives that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is their life. And I
Exactly.
think that it's, you approach it with empathy.
Right.
And I always say that, I tell my clients, I'm going to meet you where you are at in life. And that's can be very different for all my clients. So really have to put yourself in their shoes and think about how, and I've talked a lot about about this to my mom and also my stepdad. It's like their worlds become so much smaller,
Mhm.
right? And they become more and more detached from some of the other things that are happening in the world. So, so much of what they want to do is, like I said, to be heard, to be valued, to be respected, all those things. So the best gift that you can give them is your time, and talking about that, right? And now it's going to be hard. There's other issues that come into play that make that more challenging. Cognition issues. If you have a parent, let's say, that is starting to go through dementia, then the mooding. There's a lot of different behaviors that come into play there that make it a little bit harder to navigate.
Right.
But
Right.
you may have to repeat yourself a lot,
Right.
but, and sometimes they won't remember,
Yeah.
you give something away. So it's like each each individual and each relationship is different. I have a friend that I talk about in my book who had to do an all out, it like, you know, uh
She
she
had to
had
move her mom very quickly, so it had to happen rapidly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I
Right.
mean, it just all depends on the situation, right?
Yeah.
But, sometimes, like, let's say if they are still alive, sometimes you have to do kind of an intervention, right?
Yeah.
If they're to the point where, like, I'm not letting go of anything, because that happens too. Like, they don't want to let go of anything because that's all they have, or that's all they feel they have.
It's like
And
a living museum. It's their memories, and they need to see
exactly
it.
right.
Yeah.
And that is a good point, because it makes me want to talk about, like, one of the most important reasons why people have a hard time letting go of stuff, and that is the connection to their identity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody can relate to that.
Right. So it's a hard process, and it's with my mom. I mean, it's some rooms look straight out of Downton Abbey. I mean, they look like timepieces,
Yes,
and
I
you
know. I've been
you're
to your house. It's
trying to get rid
beautiful.
of it. You're trying to get a fresher home or whatever.
Yeah,
It can be very challenging, but it's also, you don't, like you have to give yourself permission to have the space you want. You don't have to take everything.
right.
You can
Yeah.
be responsible with how you donate it and get rid of it. So I think
Sure.
the bottom line is, it's always going to be challenging with
It
family.
is.
It's
It is. And I think
don't
that
have to.
the decluttering process in general is challenging.
Right.
So you're helping you're doing it for yourself, or with a loved one. And that's the hard reality. And that's why so many people get stuck. They get
Right.
overwhelmed and just, like, throw up their hands, like, I can't do this.
Well, it's
Right.
hard, right? Because
Yeah.
it is mostly, it's you have siblings and you have to, you can't just give things away. You can't just, you
Yeah.
have to hold on to things. You have to make sure the whole family's up. It's a very involved process.
It's
So
not easy.
that is going to be hard. But let's move on to, we
Okay.
know it's going to be hard. We know that you're going to have to grapple with a lot. And
Mhm.
I think I read in your book, it's like clutter is the physical manifestation of unmade decisions fueled by procrastination. And I think
Yes.
everyone can relate to that. So it's
Sure.
like, and you mentioned it before, it's like you need to give yourself permission to create the space that you need,
Yes.
So, yeah,
So when I look back, when, at that time before I wrote the book, when there was so much clutter in my house, the
right?
crazy thing, like I said, we had a big house. But the crazy thing is I didn't even have my own personal space. Like, it's so important for everybody, but I think especially for moms, is to have their own little sacred space. And what I realized, which was a very recurring pattern in my life, being a people pleaser, empath, all of that, whereas giving to everybody else.
Right.
And, I remember that we had one of those old, those older built-in, like, little desks they have in a lot of kitchens.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
that was my space, and I had my computer, my big computer on
Yeah.
there, in the kitchen. And yes, you have to give that to yourself, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and it's like so you were talking, and I love this part, is like that you were saying, like, you had already in your head, you sort of had it
yeah.
all organized. But so once you're like, okay, you know what, I'm going to start saying no to things, I'm going to edit things, I'm going to take control of my personal space, which I think
Hmm.
everybody should do. It's
Yes.
very hard. We're going to get
Yep.
into the emotional part of it, but you
Yeah,
were
sure.
talking about just like you create vision boards, get textiles, get paint, like put them out over the kitchen table.
Right.
It
Yes.
makes you feel like really get into your creative, the part of you, and
Exactly. Right.
experience those feelings, right?
Yes. Yes. It's so true. You need to, it's fun to have, I think, and again, a lot of times I will compare decluttering to, again, like dieting and
Yeah,
eating healthy. People
yeah,
is like, oh, an aspirational photo. Like, I want this dress. I want to be able to fit into this dress or whatever. So that sort of can motivate you. But one thing that I like to talk about too is the difference between motivation and momentum.
sure.
Because again, if you're like, oh, I can't wait to, deprive myself on a calorie deficit and,
Yeah.
start going to exercise classes when I can't even breathe, right? But it's like once you start eating better and a little bit at a time, then you start to get the momentum.
Right.
Do not wait until you're motivated because people say that, oh, I just can't get motivated. Yeah, right. You can't. You need momentum. So that's one thing that I like to tell people.
And you know what gave me momentum? In your book, you talked about have a mission statement for your space. I'm
Yes.
still working on mine, but that was a great
Yes.
motivator for me because it's like, well, what do I really want out of this space?
Yeah, and that's part of the planning process, right?
Right,
And the mental preparation. And it's the fun part that can
right,
really get you going, right? And you can change your mission statement every week.
right.
In fact, I actually wrote a new one to share with you because I am in the process, as you know, Julia, but I have been renting a 3-bedroom house for the last 4 years, and the owner has to suddenly sell. So I like literally have 3 weeks to get my stuff out, and I'm hoping to finalize an apartment, but I have to, that's on my plate right now. So this is my mission statement. Downsize my 3-bedroom home to a 1-bedroom apartment in order to allow flexibility, mobility, and opportunity. So, like what's the action and then what's the result?
Right,
Um, and I would say back in the day when my mission statement was something like, "Want to declutter and organize my home to reduce my anxiety." So be very specific, and you can, like I said, it can change all the time.
right.
Because the whole point of the book, like the downsize is first, and then organize, and then the last one's prioritize. The prioritize is all about, okay, like this part's done. I'm keeping up those practices of downsizing, organizing. And now it's time to like, okay, what are my priorities? What do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time now that I have more
Right.
space, more time, more freedom, more money?
There's a quote that said, the stuff you own has to help you create the life you want. And if it doesn't, why is it in your home by Peter Walsh?
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
I
Peter
agree.
Walsh. Peter
Yeah,
Walsh is like he's like the grandfather, OG declutter champion. And he used to be on the Oprah Winfrey show, and then he had his own show for a while. But yeah, it's really true. And those are the kind of questions that you ask yourself when you're trying to, so it's a little bit of the Marie Kondo, like holding something, does it bring you joy or does it not bring you joy? That's isn't the hardest part. It's all the in between
right.
stuff
Yeah,
that
what do you
you're
do
very
next?
and yes, like we're
Yeah,
very ambiguous. That makes you feel like confused or you don't know, and it's just
exactly.
junk, right? So it's that middle ground that's the hardest to get.
Absolutely. And
Yes.
I think that's the part where, like you said, once you sort of get clear, like, I want a bright, you might, like for instance, my home is filled with antiques, which are beautiful and I love, but I
Yes.
also want a brighter, fresher space. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
inspiration, how do I get that?
Yeah.
How do I work with everything to get
Yeah.
there and just get rid of a lot of the stuff that shouldn't be here? But
Yeah.
so it's like, you need to get, as you said, get busy. And I love this. You said find an action word that describes the big process that you're about to
Mhm.
embark on because it, like a diet,
Yes.
it will not be easy.
And I wrote down some for that too, so I wouldn't forget. Sometimes, when I'm doing an interview, I get so excited
Yeah.
talking about all the, transformation information, I call it. And then it's like, okay, I forgot to say this, I forgot to
Yeah.
say that. So, of course, downsize is an action verb. Create, minimize, cleanse, purge, process. That's one of the things that I really have to explain and get my clients used to and readers is that you have to trust the process. I mean, you're processing your emotions, you're processing physically your stuff, but there's sort of like also, again, it's more of this holistic trust the process. Like I'm going through this and to get to the end of the rainbow, right? And it's very in a healthy way. Process the feelings and the emotions and the triggers, right? Simplify is another great action verb. So these are kind of big picture. Decide, yeah, like today I'm going to make, maybe your daily mission statement is you're going to make some decisions today, right? Maybe your daily mission statement is to like to inspire yourself to sit down and take the time to do some research and find some colors. Like you've always loved this color. Well, why not do a room in it, you know?
Exactly.
So that just gives you a few ideas.
I love that. I love it because it is, I think once you just wrestle with the fact that this is not going to be pretty and it's not going to be easy. And that's why
Yeah,
we hold on to so much because
yeah,
nobody wants to do
it's gonna
this.
be nitty and gritty before it's pretty, you know?
Exactly. And I also love there are so many channels and there are so many books on minimalism. And
Yes.
I mean, it can be so extreme. Like there's one lady I watch where I think she only allows everybody in her house to have one cup, I think they don't even have bureaus in their house just because she doesn't want to do the laundry and she doesn't want to do a lot of dishes. And
Yes.
I think that's fine. You know, she has a lot of kids, so I mean, that's fine if that's how she wants to live. I could never live that way.
Yeah.
You have a quote that says minimalism is not about removing things you love. It's more about removing the things that distract you from the things you love. And that was by
Yes.
Joshua Becker.
Oh, yes. He's another great
Okay. Yeah.
minimalist guru, right? Yes. Right. So I think that a lot of people have a very preconceived idea about minimalism, and it is that stark, like, one chair, one little
Yeah.
plant, like
Uh-huh.
nothing. No, like,
Exactly.
but and again, everything's a spectrum from maximalist to minimalist. I tell people like try to be a minimalist, like try to get in the middle. And
Somewhere. Yeah.
also in my book, I talk about like phases, right? Like sometimes I think I call them plateaus of peace. Like there's the first purging stage, right? And then after you live for a while, like, oh, you've been holding on to this. Yeah, I haven't used that. Then it gets easier to let go. And you can kind of go through these different phases, right? So and you'll find your own like balance, I think, between the two. But yes, if something doesn't bring you joy and it doesn't you know have room in your vision on your vision board, then just really you'll get more and more better at letting go of things.
I think so. I agree with that. And I think that's what scares people is like this idea of decluttering that it's like they're going to have to get rid of things that they love. And that's
Right,
not what
right.
it
And
is.
yes,
Yeah.
and and I encourage people too, like if you do collect things and you do have something you love, get them out, show them off. And I have this
Exactly.
concept called creative condensing.
Oh,
And the easiest example or the simplest example I can give to you for that is like back in the day before everything was digital, we used to do photo collages, right? And I have tons of clients that have boxes of photos, and so we've been trying creative ways to repurpose and use their photos. And I also tell a story about an art teacher that I used to teach with. And she was unbelievably amazing, magical person. And her mother had died of cancer. And her mother was very vibrant personality, just like my friend. And she loved birds and she collected costume jewelry, a massive collection of costume jewelry. So what my friend did was to take all the costume jewelry and she did these beautiful mosaics on bird baths,
oh,
you know.
that's beautiful.
And another example of that would be like to make a quilt out of, your kid's jersey or all the t-shirts they love, things like that. Like
Yeah.
so you can turn them into beautiful, useful things that make you happy in the reason that you collected them to begin with.
That's
But
how I got my mother on board is because I showed her, I was like, if we got rid of all of this, and here's these really beautiful collectible things, we'll have more space for them.
Yeah, and you can
Finally
share
got
that.
on board. She's like, oh, okay. She
Yeah.
liked that. I
Sure.
also love, and I also love how you shared a story about how you had decluttered so much in your house that for you, I know being a really creative person, you need space and you want to just, get out all of the distractions, and it's been
Hmm.
very good for you. But you were talking about how your daughter had a project
Yeah.
and none of the mothers could find a space. Tell this story because I think that's
Okay, so at the time we were living in Columbus, Ohio, in a very funky, fun neighborhood. So it was all these little four square houses, and it was a very creative community, and absolutely love living there. But my kids were both in an organization called Destination Imagination, which is really a phenomenal organization, and they were had and the way it goes is the kids do all the work and the parents have to sit back and just encourage but not give them any ideas.
yeah.
So there's a lot of like they write scripts, they build sets, they have all kinds of different things that they need to do. And all of our houses were like totally cramped and like nobody had space, and we had to work on these big huge like backdrops, with out of cardboard used for like refrigerators and appliances. We needed a lot of space. Well, I had just gone through my first declutter. I mean, it looked very minimal. And I was so happy to offer up my house for the first time, like, oh, please come over. And
Yeah.
so one of the moms walked in the front door and she's like, wow, you really did declutter. She said, it looks like the Amish up in here. I was like,
That's so
oh
funny.
yes, that's what I was going for. I
But
just
that's
wanted,
what you got there.
yes, and I just
Yeah.
wanted a clean slate. And then that was my first plateau. And then a few weeks later, then I just like, oh, fresh coat of paint. And then I could start adding some personality. But it was also very cathartic for where I was in life, right? Getting a divorce and just processing, emotionally processing. And at the same time was really, really healthy.
Yeah, I love that story because
Yeah.
that's a victory, and I as a parent I can relate.
Yeah, and we had this big open
Yeah.
space, and the kids were roller skating in there 2 days before. It was like,
That's so awesome. I
yeah.
think that's great. So you've got your space. So I wanted to talk about we talked a little bit about getting better habits and understanding how you get this clutter and all this kind of stuff. We talked
Yes.
about helping our seniors and our friends and
Mhm.
all that stuff.
Right.
There is a I guess I'm just going to call it's called the Swedish death cleanse.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
I think it sounds so like hostile, but talk a little bit about that because I think it's a good habit for people our age to start
Yes, and
getting into.
probably I would imagine that a lot of your viewers have heard of that book
Yeah,
because it's now, since I wrote about it in my book, it's become, her book has really become a bestseller. But the whole idea is not to burden your kids or your loved ones with your old stuff.
right.
You know?
Yeah, and just
So,
yeah,
yes. So it's like a gentle process of just slowly letting go of things, right?
yeah,
Now, mind you, the Swedes don't have houses like we do full of so much stuff.
exactly.
They
Yeah,
are already their starting point is a much more minimalist, right?
right,
As are many other countries. This country is, access equals excess. And
right.
with things being so cheap, stuff from China, that we can buy on Amazon and Temu and all of these different places, right? It's like it's just a bunch of crap, actually.
And
Um,
yeah,
yes.
no, I was
But
gonna
it's
say
a
that's
great book.
not.
It's a very simple, easy read. I recommend it to everybody.
Yeah, I loved it because I think it's especially for it's something that I'm thinking about. Like, oh my gosh, I mean, I have a huge attic full of things that I've been going through from my parents that they just didn't even, they never dealt with.
And you have a big house, so when you have
Oh my
a
God,
house,
it's
it's
taking
easy
so
just
much.
to store it.
Yeah, well, it is, and it's a lot, and so I'm thinking for future, I hope to be a little bit more intentional, and I just think it's a good habit, even if you're starting a family, you're starting a home, to
Mhm.
consider that.
Absolutely.
creating that habit.
Yeah.
I also love that you cannot, Einstein said it, the problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them.
Hmm.
So you have a great, I don't know if you've coined this phrase, I think you did. It's intention. Wait, is it attention?
Oh,
Tension,
the,
attention.
yes.
Okay,
Right.
talk
Yes.
about that.
And that really is about being mindful and really just paying attention to your intention.
Right.
Because so many times we're just living life and just trudging through, and we're not really we'll pick something up and buy it without even thinking, do I need this? Do I
Mhm.
want this? And that's where you really have to outsmart the retailers and the
Mhm.
marketing, because they will get you. I have had a lot of success working with clients who fall into those traps very easily. Some that are still falling into the trap even after we declutter, right? It's hard. I mean,
It's so hard. Yeah.
I have to keep, I mean, online is different, but I can't go into Target hardly,
Mhm.
unless I have something very specific. I have to, it's control. And, it's really, but so there's the attention about what you're buying and bringing into your home and how to be responsible about that, right? And then once you get there, because again, like I said, these are habits. We have to continually um, practice the habits of downsizing, organizing, prioritizing, because it's not like we just clean up our house and organize it and it stays that way. But it's really important, to know that, like, when you do get to that point, everything organized just means, at its most basic definition, everything has a space and place. If
Right.
it doesn't, it becomes what? Clutter.
Clutter.
It's clutter.
My pantry being a good example. I just organized it the year before, and
Exactly. Yeah.
I didn't change the pattern
Yes.
or the habit, and it was the Bermuda Triangle. I just looked you couldn't
That's a
find
good one.
anything. Yeah.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
going to ask you one more question, and then I want you to finish up however you want.
Okay.
But you called it, and I think you just talked about this, but I want to make sure I understand the 3 points.
Okay.
It's breaking the twitch, and
Okay.
the twitch
Yes.
is
So
staying on point. So I think you have
yes.
3 examples. I'm going to let you talk about.
Yes. So breaking the twitch is I found out about it through this really great podcaster, Anthony Ongaro. His podcast is called Breaking the Twitch. So check
Okay.
it out. Um, and I included him as a story in my book because I think so many people could relate to it. And it's so, in this digital age, we're all struggling with it. So like I don't have my little notes so I don't forget anything. So again, it's about being mindful. So the twitch, Anthony calls it, is the impulsive, unproductive response to discomfort.
Okay.
So think scrolling.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example, right? Where, and it's like when we feel like, oh, okay, we're sitting in our brain, we start thinking about the things that bring anxiety or things we have to do, procrastination. So what do? It's a lot. Yeah, procrastination is another word for it. We start scrolling on our phones and we're looking for, dopamine to make us feel with one click we can buy something, right, on social
Right.
media. So and
So
the
guilty.
way the way he explained how the twitch impacted his life is that he loved adventure and loved to travel, and he realized that he was spending a lot of money on Amazon. So he went and tallied up everything he had spent in a year, and he was dumbfounded at how much money he had spent, right? So you're not paying attention. He wasn't paying attention to it. He could have
Mhm.
taken that money and gone on vacation. So you want to try to really figure out how to minimize your distractions, build new habits, which is what you're going to be doing anyway when you're downsizing, um, and prioritizing, because like so much of what we do is habitual.
Yeah.
So create the new, and then also when you do that, it creates new opportunities. And what I love about these 3 points is it beautifully mirrors the 3 habits, right? So
Right.
minimize, downsize, build new habits, organize, create opportunities is prioritize, right? So I just thought it was so refreshing, and it was something that a lot of people could relate to because we all, I think, I don't know anybody that doesn't have an Amazon account.
Yeah. No,
Just saying.
it's very true. It's
It's
very
very true.
true. And it's
And
very, I never thought of it because you're like, oh, these cute, like, hand towels, whatever, $3. Yeah, I'm so guilty of it because I love
yeah, and
keeping my decor on.
right. And I have a client that I'm working with right now, and she's still really trying to fight the market's on sale. And it's like there's something always going to be on sale. And this is why once I really start to build my YouTube channel, I'm going to be going in depth with a lot of these topics.
Okay.
And the whole marketing is oh, it was 40% off. Well, I will tell you, as a fashion designer, um, all of that, all those promotions are built in, right?
Oh, that's
And
right.
then the price is inflated.
Like
So
100%.
then they can mark it down to 40% off. In fact, I worked for a large retailer that worked like that and then decided they wanted to do like the everyday low price, like Walmart. It didn't work. The
Interesting.
customers went berserk
Ah,
because they would rather be like tricked into thinking they're saving money. So the majority of that's why it's so important. Like you have to declutter your inbox too. If you're on mailing lists for all these companies that they will hook you in. One of my clients had a massive Bed Bath and Beyond Body Works, whatever,
yeah.
problem. And
Uh-huh.
she said, well, it was this much, buy two, get one for, and I said, look, there are always going to be that. And by the way, look at the ingredients because there's a whole lot of chemicals. And
Yeah,
for the
that's what
little
I'm
time that
hearing.
I've known you, I know that this does not align with the way you want to live your healthy life.
Yeah, that's true.
So, and that all also ties in with the intention. And one last thing I'll say about intention is that um, another practice or exercise that I suggest in my book, and this is something I use every week. And I call it they're like intention cards. You can take I love, like an index card, or I took these paper coasters and drew on them. It's a fun exercise, but it helps you really. What you want to do is just after you've done your downsizing and organizing, really, okay, what are my priorities in life? What, because you may rattle off some, but then you have to look at, is that how I spend my time?
That's right. Yeah.
Right? So you have to really figure out like what's the most important thing to you. And sometimes you forget, and because life is so busy. Well, I write mine down and I draw something fun, different colors and highlighters, and on the back I can write specific points.
Mhm.
Like for me, one of and then I trade them out or I put them on my desk so I see them. And kind of it was a good reminder of what I need to work on. Like for me, a big one right now is allowing because I have just been such like an alpha female for so long and taking care of my family and
Yeah.
all of this stuff that I am guarded and I need to allow people to help me, allow things to happen in my life, just to,
Yeah.
let things happen, right? So, or maybe it's to, spend time with your family more. It
Yeah.
could be anything. It could be to focus on certain things, and you can kind of switch them out. Again, it goes along with the kind of like your whatever your mission statement is.
Right. And how you want to use your home, how you want to use your space, how you're
Yeah,
using your time and your buying. So
exactly.
that's just you have these cards or
Mhm.
coasters. You have them around so you can see them, and then you
Yes.
just remind yourself. That's very important. I think that's a good
Yeah, it
idea.
is. Like I said, I love a visual thing to kind of bring me to get me focused and kind of bring me back to to center.
I think a lot of creative people do need that.
Yeah.
I think,
Mhm.
and I think so it's such a As you say, it is such a big process, and it's not easy. You need those those moments where you need to check in and have
Yes, and
reminders of what you're doing. I think that's important.
celebrate. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And I would want one thing that I haven't really talked about that I would want to say to your listeners or your viewers is that um and you've done such a great job kind of framing everything up, Julia. Thank you so much. But like when you start going back to what I said about momentum, I always suggest to start with a smaller space, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just to get one thing checked up and sometimes like alternate an easier space with a more problem area, right? So maybe it's a closet, an entryway, or a kitchen island. Like kitchen islands usually get so much stuff dumped, the poor kitchen. It's just like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
the control center of the
Center. Yeah.
house, right? And it's just like, I
Uh,
can come
I
up throw
know
everything.
everything.
And so if there's anything in your kitchen that's not kitchen related, it shouldn't be in there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, smaller space, small win, kind of. And then the other thing is enlist help. Like, again, like I said, I'm the kind of person it's hard for me to ask for help. I did everything on my own, but I didn't think that I knew I could. And back then, I don't think that I knew that there's like organizers that could come help you do that, right?
Like
And
you. Yeah.
yes,
So if you need help, Leigh's here.
yes, right. Or get your family involved. Like if whoever resides abides, right?
Yeah.
Like I worked with a mom who had 5 kids and this woman was just busting her butt every day, cleaning and cooking and organizing. And these kids were like not doing anything. And I had to kind of be a little bit of a nanny 911 too and have a
Yeah.
family meeting over
Yeah.
it. And I
Good for
said,
you.
yeah. And I could see they really loved their mother, but she was exhausted,
Overwhelmed.
right? So
Yeah.
they were, we gave them things to do. And there's also, you can make it fun, especially with kids. And there's this thing that I called like a finder's fun. It is so much fun, like finding money, gift cards that haven't been used, or gift cards that still have money on them, things that you've been looking for. I couldn't believe all the stuff that I found, and you will too. So that's really fun. But
Yeah.
yes, get help who lives with you,
Yeah.
or a friend. A lot of my clients are ADHD, and they have a lot of issues with executive function and get very overwhelmed. They need what they call like a body double.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
true.
like an
Yeah.
accountability. I would also compare it to like a trainer at the gym.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they're going to hold you accountable,
Yeah.
right? 'Cause showing up, you have an appointment. Um, but yeah, so that's a very good
Well,
thing.
thank you so much for coming on. And there's so much more to talk about. You have,
I know we could talk for
so
2 days.
many, but you had a lot of sections I haven't even touched on. But I want you to come back, and I hope you can, because I think everybody's going to love this. But thank you so much,
Thank you.
and just stay on. And I'm gonna like talk to you for a second, but I'm gonna end it right here. But thank you so much for
Okay.
Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And I'm going to include all of Leigh's contact information in the description and where to buy her book. So anyways, I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you guys the next time.